my speaker for today, Stephanie Malone. She's talking about perspectives on teaching and supporting mathematics development, one of your big research areas. So over to you.
So hi everybody, this project I'm going to talk about today, just finished analysing it, so it's all nice and fresh. It is actually possible due to an AL school grant, so that was awarded to us, and here is the result. Okay, so what we know is despite the media portraying that autistic people all excel in mathematics, that's not necessarily true. When we look at the research, it's about a quarter of autistic children or autistic individuals actually have challenges within mathematics that isn't explainable by a cognitive ability. So they're showing math skills lower than you would expect based on their cognitive skills. And actually only something like 5% have the excelling in mathematics that you would typically expect thanks to the media. So very little research has actually looked at this and looked at why this is the case. And the research that has been done has very much lent heavily on what we know from neurotypical individuals to try and help understand why autistic people may have challenges in this area. So some of the research has looked at, well, what are the predictors of maths ability for autistic children? Some of them have looked at, well, here's a pre-existing intervention. Is this effective for autistic kids as well? But no one's really sat back and gone, maybe they learn in a different way. Maybe we need to understand how they learn best to be able to then put these interventions in place to best support them. So, who's better to ask? Obviously the children, but in lieu of the children, their teachers. Their teachers are so experienced in helping their children learn. So we turn to the teachers and go, okay, so from your experience of working with these children, what are the strengths that you see in them? What parts of maths do they excel in? What parts do they find a little bit more challenging? Is there any differences between how autistic kids learn and their neurotypical counterparts? And what strategies and curriculum changes have you found are effective in supporting the maths development of these kids? So that's exactly what we did. We spoke with 11 teachers. I know it's only a small number, but it took me a year to get 11 teachers. So it was the best I could achieve. Once I got over that 10, I was like, excellent. So 11 teachers, and all of these teachers have worked with primary school aged autistic children within the last year. So they're all experienced and that memory is fresh in their minds. So of those, we had a nice spread. We had 5 of them who had worked in special schools and 6 of them who were currently working in mainstream. But importantly, those in special schools had also worked in mainstream, so they could talk about those differences between autistic and non-autistic kids too. So we did some semi-structured interviews. I said it'd be around about an hour, and we had a mean duration of 52 minutes. And then I used inductive thematic analysis for my very, very first time to try and figure out what these teachers were saying and what exactly we found. And thanks to Kate for her assistance. So we found that there were 4 emergent themes. So we had removing ambiguity, comprehending and using the language, planning that supports the learner, and recognizing prior notions and experiences. So due to time and the fact that qualitative takes so long to explain, I'm just going to talk about the first 2. So removing ambiguity and comprehending and using the language. So removing ambiguity, this was the most prominent theme that emerged. The teachers spoke about this a lot. All of the teachers mentioned this. So it's the idea that mathematics is often a very abstract thing. I know, thinking back to my own school experiences, I had to learn about integration and differentiation. What is that and what does it do? It's so abstract. And what they found is that abstract nature of mathematics can be challenging for autistic students. So we see here that one teacher said, if it's a little bit abstract, unless I've really sat down and explained that task to them, they can become frustrated quite easily and give up. So it seems it's that abstract nature, that lack of concrete understanding, that is actually one of the things that's quite challenging. So autistic learners were reported to find those abstract tasks challenging. So if it's an open-ended, unstructured task, it's associated with a sense of overwhelm if the task hasn't been explained clearly enough or enough guidance been provided on how to accomplish that task. Then finally, when we think about how we can help support students who have this difficulty with ambiguity, teachers often said that they use visual supports and explicit instruction to help remove that ambiguity or to help increase that concreteness of what it is that they're doing. So teachers use visuals, so that's those visual supports, which I thought was a lovely example. So if you're just sitting there and someone says, oh, add a half to a third, what does that mean? Like, how can you visualize what a half is, what a third is? It's really quite ambiguous. But once someone actually gives you a paper plate and divides it into those portions and shows you how half fits into the thirds and quarters and all this, all makes more sense. You've got that concrete thing in front of you. You can visualize it now. And having that concrete visualization is actually really supportive for autistic children, as reported by these teachers. So we then had comprehending and using the language. So this was our next most prominent theme. So the linguistic components of mathematics were identified as a challenge. So whether that's providing a verbal response to the question that's been asked, or whether it's just trying to understand what the task is asking in the first place. So one teacher said that the communication skills around articulating processes, answering, you've got to have that inferential comprehension. And I found that the language skills is actually probably the greatest things for kids showing their mathematical language. So he's underpinning that it's not necessarily the maths that's challenging. It's understanding what they're trying to get at. What do the teachers want you to do? Can you understand the language? Can you understand the task? And then also with maths, there's so many ways that we can word things. We can have really wordy word problems, or we can make it really concise in one sentence. We can say add, we can take plus or sum. All of these things mean the same thing, but there's all this language that goes into it. So if you're having trouble understanding that language, then it's going to make demonstrating your maths ability a lot harder. So the challenges were most evident in those word problems, as you would probably expect. So one teacher said that the reason why we struggle to apply mathematical concepts to problem-solving questions doesn't come down to the child's mathematical ability, but more their actual ability to understand what the question is asking. It comes to the comprehension of the question. And then I've always found as well tasks and mathematics tasks that are too literacy heavy. The literacy demands are too much, the mathematics can get lost for children on the spectrum. So it's that language component, and again, it's the ability to read the question to actually discern what the important points are, as opposed to the ability to do the maths task itself. So to support the kids with this, teachers use lots of different strategies to help kind of demystify understanding that language. So some teachers find it useful to read the information aloud to the child, so that literacy skills had been removed, so it wasn't a reading test anymore, it's back to being more of a maths test. And then some of them use different coloured highlighters, so they highlighted key words for the children to focus on. So it wasn't a mass of words now, it was just these are the things you need to think about, and this is how you're going to solve the maths problem. So, in terms of removing ambiguity, that was the most prominent theme. Everybody said it so many times. And so it actually embeds really well with the literature. There is a growing body of literature that suggests that autistic people can have relative challenge when acquiring abstract knowledge compared to concrete knowledge. So if it's something you can clearly see and visualize, that's that concrete stuff that tends to be easier to acquire. And then there's also, when we think of evidence-supported practices, so interventions and strategies that can be put into place to help support learning, we know that using that visual support, so the paper plates to help with maths and that kind of stuff, and also the direct instructions, they're evidence-supported practices for academic skills more broadly. There is now an increasing amount of research looking at whether these things are useful for mathematics, more so the visual supports compared to the direct instruction, but it is showing that there is this evidence there that it can help support a wide variety of math skills, such as addition, subtraction, fractions, beautiful plates. And so the implication, when we're teaching, we need to just be aware that with mathematics, there is a lot of abstract terms. And unless you can see what that looks like, it's quite hard to grasp what a fraction is, what differentiation is, I still don't know, what integration is. Without actually being able to visualize it, it can make it quite hard to learn. So if we're able to use these visual strategies to help minimize that abstract nature, the teachers found that that was effective for the students. And also to make sure that the information we provide is clear and structured. So it gives those prompts that direct sort of instruction. Then we have comprehending and using the language. So autistic children may experience, from research, we know autistic children may experience challenges in comprehension, and this can happen in lots of different areas, but it could be particularly relevant when we're trying to consider the context. So often when we're comprehending what's being told to us, we infer the meaning of things based on the whole context, and some autistic people can find that more challenging, or when the language is figurative rather than literal. And then autistic children can also experience challenges with reading comprehension. So we know this already, reading comprehension can be a relative challenge compared to reading fluency. So just because someone's able to read something doesn't mean they're necessarily understanding it. And we know this from the literature working with autistic kids. So implications, again, use clear language. Make sure that you're not overwhelming the words there, just have the things that are necessary to actually do the task. Be mindful that if you're looking at assessing mathematics, you are assessing mathematics and not literacy. Obviously, word problems are a part of the curriculum, so there will be occasions when that is being used, but just be aware it's also literacy as well as the mathematics component. And then also to consider ways to support children to identify the most relevant aspects of the word problem. So highlighting the thing, but then it kind of takes away the overwhelm. You've got the key things that you need to focus on. So in conclusion, maths includes lots of different abstract concepts and processes, and considering how those ambiguous concepts can be made more concrete could be beneficial for autistic learners. And then the linguistic components of mathematics may actually mask the learner's actual ability. So just because they can't answer a word problem doesn't mean they don't know the answer. It could just be that language component that's making it more challenging. Thank you.
Did any of the educators that you interviewed articulate concerns around the new version 9 of the curriculum, given the maths curriculum is, I should identify as a maths teacher myself, the version 9 of the curriculum is so heavily built in the maths curriculum around problem solving. Did any of them articulate the concerns about moving and transitioning from 8.4 to 9?
So there was one teacher that did mention about concerns of moving in the curriculum, but he never went into detail about why that was, no matter how much I kind of prompted.
Yeah.
But there was concerns from one teacher. Interestingly enough, the vast majority of the teachers never really spoke about the curriculum at all. It was all about how they delivered the content, how they supported the students rather than the curriculum.
Where to from here? So how are you going to progress this research?
Well, I am currently speaking with autistic adults about their perspectives. Ethics is easier to work with adults. So I'm asking them to think back to when they were at school, and so we're seeing if it corroborates what the teachers said. Anecdotally, I was speaking with someone the other day, and they said that when they were at school, they couldn't articulate their answer, how they got to their answer, because it wasn't a maths process. They were actually seeing it in like hills and trees, and it was how all that came together, so more like a synesthesia kind of thing. Obviously, the teachers aren't able to see that sort of process. Not saying that happens for everybody, but it's only through speaking with autistic people themselves that we can hear that. So I'm speaking with autistic people to find out what their experiences were at school, but also the implications that it has now on their adult life. So has it influenced their career? What do they find challenging when it comes to mathematics in work or in their daily life? So that's currently where it's going, but there's a lot more to do.
Have any of the visual, there's a lot of little short videos that explain these concepts. If you Google, those things. Have any of them used those? Teachers use those, like.
I don't know specifically about the teachers. In terms of the research that's looked at intervention and supports for autistic primary school children, no one's used that to date. Not that.
Oh, okay. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're like,
Amy.
Only if I'm generalizing, because looking at math as inquiry processes,
I really like how you tackle it as problem solving as a skill set. Just wondering with the general pattern with autistic students, from problem solving skill set, like which phases do they have most difficulties with? Is it the identification of problem, or is it actually other phases in solving inquiry phases? Because I teach in science, I would like to know which phase I need to support my students the most and what ways.
No one's looked at this, we can totally do this study. Yeah, no one's really looked at it. We don't know at what point becomes that challenge. I mean, thinking about the word problems, the challenge potentially is also that regional comprehension to begin with. So it happens right at the very start, understanding the process. But yeah, we don't know.
So what type of support based on this research would you then provide to teachers to help students in their classes? Like, so things to be just additional time in exams, or just, you know, what sort of type of
So
real?
it's more from these, like this is 11 teachers, and we don't know that much about this area. But it's really about having not necessarily extra time in the exam or anything. It's more about how the information is provided for them to really get an idea of what these concepts mean, so they can see how it works in the real world. Why is it important I'm learning this concept? How does it apply to life? What does it look like? And once that concrete understanding is there, that seems to be helpful from speaking with these teachers. The more research you know, to see if it actually is effective when it comes to support strategy.
We have a lot of autistic kids, and I teach in high schools though, and they found they couldn't decode the word problem. That was, so I would write alternative assessment at the same level, but an alternative version where I took out the words, and it was just the maths problem. So I was just assessing the maths skill as opposed to their decoding skill.
Yeah.
And then when they got into senior, they liked maths more because it came about numbers rather than words.
Yeah.
Whereas in junior secondary, maths is about words, and in senior secondary, it's about numbers. And when they could just do it with numbers, they liked it a lot more.
So there's a lot of research looking at maths anxiety for non-autistic people. There's a little bit starting to look at maths anxiety for autistic people. But what you see is that maths anxiety starts to really form once you get towards the end of primary school, beginning of secondary, when it does start to get more complex. And if there are what the research has shown so far is if we can help reduce that anxiety at the start, so removing the thing that causes the anxiety, then that anxiety doesn't necessarily happen or doesn't come to the same degree. And so people are more willing to carry on and learn more about mathematics because that stressful experience isn't there.
Thank you. What a great way to end I thought a really interesting day. So thanks to all our ACE researchers. It was just the perfect end to, I think, our discussion today. I'm going to gather up the bits of paper that may be left on your table, so please don't throw them away as you walk out the door. And I just want to I realised today, but I'm going to use this as a bit of an illustration. I did not start the day with an acknowledgement of country because I was so running behind and so harassed when I got here. But I think in that space that we were talking about before, where we can all talk together and, you know, make mistakes and try and disagree and all sorts of stuff, that's the kind of environment where, you know, it would have been okay if someone came up and said, Fran, you